Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? Today, we continue with our NFL division previews, and today we cover the AFC North. We're going to each pick our season over-under season win totals and bets for each team. Guys, just a heads up, this will be our last division preview on the podcast. The last 4 division previews will be coming out exclusively on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe over there so you don't miss out. But joining me, of course, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Hey, Brad, as we get closer and closer and these, to say the least, these interesting preseason games continue, and one of those teams that we'll be talking about today, you know what? Let's get into it. I was about to give a hot take and give something away, but you know what? I'm going to hold on to it.
Oh, all right. We got a hot take coming, guys. Let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers then, Alex, because I know this is a team that we have pretty different opinions on. And if you haven't already, guys, we talked about this team on the YouTube channel. Pretty different opinions on what we think the Steelers are going to be in 2024. But look, we know this team, the big additions, of course, were at quarterback, adding Russell Wilson, adding Justin Fields. They also added cornerback Dante Jackson. They drafted Troy Fautanu out of Washington, a player that we both really like. They added Patrick Queen, the linebacker from the Ravens. They bring over wide receiver Van Jefferson, safety Deshaun Elliott. Now, they lost wide receiver Deontay Johnson, who's now with the Panthers. But I think it's safe to say, Alex, regardless of how people feel about Pittsburgh, on paper, they've improved this team this offseason.
Okay, so I know how you opened that up, but and I remember saying to you off mic, I think my view of the Steelers has changed as we go through this preseason, and I'm not sure what's going on in that quarterback room. I'm not even sure what's going on with this offensive line, because we like Broderick Jones, we like Troy Fautanu. I thought bringing over Isaac Samula last year, and then they got Zach Frazier this year as well. I thought they should look better, but they're not, and even the running game is struggling, whether it's Jaylen Warren or Najee Harris. And Najee Harris is in the contract year, so I was looking for big things from him. I did have high hopes for them when the trade happened, but now that I'm seeing semi-live bullets, I actually don't have as high hopes as I had for them when we initially began the conversation and started talking about them right after the trade happened. I think the moves they made in trading Deontay Johnson and getting Dante Jackson, I thought that was a steal for them, because Dante Jackson now gives them 2 solid corners, and you can really play Minkah in that free safety position the way he should be played, as opposed to having to dump down into the slot or always shade over to one side. Now you have 2 solid cornerbacks, so I think the defense, as always, is going to be on point, especially bringing in Peyton Wilson. If he can stay healthy, that 1-2 inside linebacker spot with Queen and Peyton Wilson is going to look great. The issue is simply on the offensive side. What we talked about the quarterback room, Russell hasn't fared well. Justin hasn't fared well. Russell more because of the offensive line. He doesn't have any time to throw the ball. He doesn't even have any time to make bad plays. And when he is able to make some plays, he's hearing footsteps. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is they're lacking, and I can't believe I'm about to say this for the first time, they're lacking in weapons, because Roman Wilson is out. So now their wide receivers are George Pickens, who we know was ascending, but Van Jefferson, I'm a Florida guy. I'm sorry, no. And then now they're starting Calvin Austin, who's simply just a 9-route guy and a burner. They have 0 depth in their wide receiver room, and I don't know how far we would have to go back before we could even say anything like that. This is just going to have to be another stand on your head coaching season for Mike Tomlin for them to be good, and my peak for them is going to be 8-9 this season.
Wow, you really have pivoted, Alex. Is that your hot take, or are you still saving that?
That's my hot take, and it's really a hot take for the people that know us, because I was very high on the Steelers.
Yeah, or the people that checked out the YouTube video because, yeah, you were definitely high on this team in the summer. I think you really liked the direction this team was headed on paper. But look, it's preseason. We always say that. Look, you take it with a grain of salt. You never want to put too much into preseason, but it hasn't looked very good. And I think if you're a Steelers fan, offensively, you really do have to be concerned. They bring in these quarterbacks. On paper, it should be a big upgrade over Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett, but it hasn't looked good so far. Now you have a new offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. He's supposed to be bringing over more of a system that should fit this team with a power running game, similar to what we saw with Derrick Henry in Tennessee when he was offensive coordinator there and when Tannehill was playing his best football. But man, it looks rough right now in that offensive line. Look, they've built up this offensive line mostly through the draft, and so far the results aren't looking very promising. Now, I do think there are a couple players that I want to highlight that I think could be breakout players this year for Pittsburgh. Both guys from the 2023 draft class, second round pick Keanu Benton on the defensive line, I think is a name to circle. I also think their 2023 fourth round pick Nick Herbig at linebacker are guys that I think are potential breakout players to watch. And look, this team, I think, has enough talent on both sides of the ball, even though we've been critical of the offense so far. I think they have enough talent to be competitive again in 2024. I think the quote-unquote upgraded, and I say that in air quotes here, upgraded quarterback play, I think, is huge for this team, who has had maybe the worst quarterback room in the NFL the past 3 years. But here's the thing. I don't believe in either one of these guys, Alex, and you kind of knew where I was going here because I wasn't a big fan of either one of these guys when they brought him in. I understand that it's an upgrade from what they had, but I just don't think either one of these guys is really a true solution for this team. I think Russell Wilson is shot. I said it a couple years ago that he looked like he was a guy that was on the downside of his career. It continues to get worse, and I'm not sure it's going to ever get any better for him. And as far as Justin Fields, he just never developed as a quarterback. He basically looks like the same player he did when he came out of Ohio State, and that doesn't bode well for Pittsburgh either. So I think either way with the quarterback situation, because let's face it, that really is the big story here in Pittsburgh is the quarterback room. I think Fields either wins the starting job the way things are going in preseason, or eventually I think he's going to take over that job from Russell Wilson. Look, Mike Tomlin, maybe he keeps the win streak alive this year with as much talent as they have. But man, these quarterbacks, they have limited ceilings. I don't see them competing to win this division, Alex. Now, you made your pick for the season over under win total. Right now, Vegas has them at 8.5 wins. I'm going to take the over, but just barely. I think 9 wins at best for this team. Look, it's a loaded division, a loaded conference, and it's a tough schedule. Alex, how about the Cleveland Browns? Look, this is an interesting team, just like every team in this division, because, look, we had one of the most competitive divisions in the history of the NFL last year. 3 teams from this division making the playoffs. And, of course, Cincinnati still had a winning record. So pretty impressive stuff for all these teams, and it's really interesting to see which ones are going to take that step forward. I don't know about Cleveland, though. When you look at their key additions for this team, they bring over wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, linebacker Devin Bush, linebacker Jordan Hicks. They bring in Jameis Winston as a backup quarterback. Now, they lose linebacker Sion Takitaki, and, of course, Joe Flacco no longer there. He came in and kind of played the hero role. This was really one of the quietest teams this offseason, Alex.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good thing. I think coming off Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski, they finally, not finally, but they clicked and he did a great job last year, well-deserved. I guess the main thing that I'm looking at here are 2 things. One, obviously the quarterback position, but 2, Nick Chubb. Who is Nick Chubb right now? I'm not sure who he is at the moment. That was a terrible knee injury, screwed up my entire fantasy year, but, he's back. He appears to be healthy. I know he's doing light work in camp. They do have Jerome Ford still. Donta Foreman, I know he had an injury, and they also picked up Nyheim Hines. The defense right now, we're just going to say the defense is the defense, and we're just going to give them that. They're a good defense, even though they had a situation happen with Mike Hall recently. So once they kind of get past that, or if they have to, move on from him, I still think the defense will be a top 10, top 12 group. We know they picked up, Jerry Jeudy this year. They gave him a contract. I'm not sure why. And then they turn around and trying to trade Amari Cooper for Brandon Ayuk. I don't know. There's a lot going on there with this team in terms of who they want to go forward with. I think the answer to the question in the quarterback room, and I said it before, it was a hot take then, but it's not a hot take now because I've already said it, but Jameis Winston will end up starting for this team but at some point this season, and it won't be because of injury. It will be because Deshaun Watson isn't who you out there in PGF Nation thought he was. Everyone keeps wanting to go back 3 and 4 years to what he was then. That was 3 to 4 years ago. This is now a new player in a system that has a lot of weapons. The offensive line, solid. And Njoku, top 12, top 10 tight end, depending on where you want to put him. This, to me, is simply all on the quarterback room. Whether it's Jameis or whether it's Deshaun, I think they have the weapons. They have the defense. It's on the quarterback room to put it all together and move forward. A lot of people have Pittsburgh in last place. I have Cleveland in last place at 7-10.
Yeah, Alex, look, the Browns defense, I think, is going to keep them competitive in most games, to your point, right? Myles Garrett, one of the best defenders in the league, the reigning defensive player of the year, even though he shouldn't have won it. We'll save that for another day. Zadarius Smith, of course, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, one of the best linebackers in the game, Jordan Hicks, Grant Delpit at safety. Look, they have one of the best defenses in the NFL, period. And I think because of that, they are going to be competitive. But to your point, Alex, let's talk about the only player that really matters the most, and that's Deshaun Watson. And it goes back to them giving this guy $230 million guaranteed. Look, that deal has become a disaster for the Browns. That's the bottom line. This guy has been dog shit since joining this team. He's only completed 59.8% of his throws since he joined the Browns. 14 touchdowns, 9 picks, and 7 fumbles. I'm sorry, that's not a $230 million quarterback. There's no way around it. This team has been winning despite Deshaun Watson, and that's because they have a great coach and a great team around him. There's no excuses for this guy. He has to get it done. If he doesn't play like a top 10 quarterback this season, this is going to go down as the worst deal in NFL history. It has gotten that ugly for them, Alex. And look, from a financial standpoint, I get it with Jameis Winston, but with that much money committed, what they had to do to acquire this guy, can they really bench him, Alex, or possibly move off of him if it continues to go off the rails? Is that really even a possibility financially for the Browns?
It would be a total of $110 million dead cap hit in 2025, 26, well, 20, I'll just average up, $27 million in 2026, and there'd be a savings of a negative 46. So, you know, it's not looking too well in Cleveland. Like, it has to work. You know, right now they're sitting with $27 million in cap space, and even if you look forward to 2025, they would be sitting basically with they're already at a negative $62 million in salary cap as it stands right now. So just projecting out and looking at the numbers, there's not enough restructuring in the world that says they can get rid of that player.
Now the season over/under win total is 8.5. I'm taking the under. I think this team, like we talked about, they're talented and they do have a good coach, but I don't trust Watson. I don't trust the quarterback room in general. I think 7 wins in last place in the AFC North is a very realistic possibility. Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. We personally love the pick'em game. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today with promo code PGF. That's promo code PGF to claim your special pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. How about the defending AFC North champs? The Baltimore Ravens, Alex. Look, this is the most balanced and complete roster in the division. The 1 seed from last year in the AFC, the best team in the regular season. And look, if not for a coaching meltdown, most likely they beat Kansas City and may have even won the Super Bowl last year. Not only that, they would have been the favorites over San Francisco, who they blew out in the regular season. But before I get too off track here, this is 2024. I still think they're the class of this division. Lamar Jackson, of course, coming off of another MVP season, had his best season yet, and it was under new offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who came in last year. And look, most quarterbacks, they don't truly completely understand a new offensive system until year 2. Historically, that's really what most quarterbacks talk about, is that second year in the system is when things really start to click. I'm excited to see what this offense looks like now, year 2 with Monken and Lamar Jackson.
Okay. Baltimore, as they like to say, Ravens. So you mentioned even and balanced across the board, and I'm just assuming because Lamar Jackson is such a huge weapon, the addition of Derrick Henry, which we hope. I still believe he is a top 3, top 4 running back in this league. I know he doesn't do a lot out of the backfield, but still as a running back, still would have to call him top 4 in the league. That offensive line, if Ronnie Stanley, well, actually, the offensive line is where I'm going to start at on purpose, because the left side of this offensive line is okay. It's the right side that's the problem. You know, they lost John Simpson, as well as they lost Morgan Moses, who's a stalwart. Both. You heard me talk about them. If you would like to hear me go more extensively on those 2 players, you can listen to the AFC East, my AFC East talk in terms of the Jets. But they lost both of those players, both of those guys starters. So now they're going brand new, a rookie, and then a third year vet in Daniel Falali. Hopefully I said that correct. On the right side. So that right side is going to get work depending on who you're facing. And we talk about the division being tough. Regardless of what we said about Cleveland and Pittsburgh, they have legit pass rushes. So the right side of that line is going to get attacked a lot. And what does that mean when your right side is getting attacked a lot? That means that tight end and Mark Andrews is going to be staying in a lot, which is Lamar's favorite target. I do like Zay Flowers, but they still have a lot of issues in regards to that wide receiver room. Rashard Bateman cannot stay healthy. Nelson Aguilar, well, you can go talk to Philly fans for that. He does get open, but then he does have other issues. They did pick up Tez Walker from UNC in the 4th round. I haven't gotten a chance to see what he's done in preseason, but he could possibly assist here, but they need a legit X receiver. I'm not saying they need Randy Moss or Calvin Johnson, but they just need a legit guy on that outside, which would help Zay Flowers work a little bit more on the inside. Now, I can see a lot of 12 personnel because Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews' absence last year showed that he's a guy now going into his third season. The defense, listen, there's not really too much to talk about. They always keep, now they did lose Mike McDonald, so we have to talk about that. Zach Orr is now the DC, but we know Baltimore seems to always just, rinse, wash, and repeat with their coordinators. However, there still may be a learning curve when you come into you using with a new DC and Zach Orr. They did lose Patrick Queen. I know they have Roquan Smith. It's up to Trent Simpson. This will be his second year out of Clemson to see if he can step in and do some things. So the defense is going to be straight. Picking up Nate Wiggins, I think was a steal for them in the first round as well, and they can develop them because they have had a lot of injuries with Marlon Humphreys there, so they needed to get somebody else back there. Now, hopefully, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphreys, and Nate Wiggins, that'll be a formidable back four that can help out the front seven as well as this new coordinator. But I do still have them ahead in the division. Sorry, Ravens fans, not winning it, but I do have them currently at 11-6. Oh, and I also want to mention TJ Tampa. I think one of our sleepers that we talked about a lot leading up to the draft. They also have TJ Tampa in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, a guy that we kept pounding the table for during the draft podcast that we were doing leading up to the draft and, of course, after the draft. Love that guy. I think he's a top 5 corner in this class. And to your point about the offensive line, you're absolutely right. I think losing Morgan Moses, I think John Simpson are big losses, but this is a team that drafts and develops offensive line talent almost as well as anybody. I loved the pick of Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. I thought he had first-round talent. I think he's the guy that's going to come in and fill one of those holes. Of course, Tyler Linderbaum at center is one of the top centers in the game. And you mentioned Ronnie Stanley, one of the best tackles. So I think overall the offensive line is still going to be okay. I think the biggest loss for this team, and you mentioned it, was Mike McDonald. Unbelievable defensive coordinator for this team. What he did for them was lights out. He's now the head coach in Seattle. It's going to be interesting to see that. But loved Nate Wiggins in the draft. You mentioned him as well. Really big fan of him and TJ Tampa. This is just a team that, like I said, they draft and develop talent as well as anybody in the NFL. Now, I think Geno Stone was a big loss. Patrick Queen was a solid player, but I don't think it's a huge loss for them. The big addition here, of course, is Derrick Henry. And look, on paper, it seems like the perfect fit. Power back, demands extra players in the box. Well, he did in his prime at least. So here's the big question mark for Derrick Henry. He's 30 years old, which, look, 30 is the scariest number for running backs. Plus, last year, we started seeing just a little bit of signs of age here, just a bit, with his worst season since 2018. Now, I'm not counting the injury year that he had in 21. But on the bright side, right, if you want to look at the positives here, he's never had a quarterback like this. So maybe he bounces back to that all-pro level one more time. Maybe there's still some gas left in the tank here. Plus, second-year running back Keaton Mitchell is going to return at some point off of that torn ACL. He was really, really good before the injury. So this backfield could have some depth when he comes back. The season over-under win total for them is 10.5. Look, I'm still buying Ravens stock. Until proven otherwise, I like this team. I still think it's the best team in this division. I'm taking the over with 11 wins and another AFC North title. Cincinnati Bengals, Alex, the Bengals' playoff hopes are going to rely on quarterback Joe Burrow's availability, period. Because injuries, unfortunately, are starting to become a big part of this guy's story. And it's really held this team back in recent years.
Well, yeah, so that's the first and foremost, because whenever Joe Burrow's healthy, there's two things that are happening. They're either in an AFC championship game or facing the Chiefs, or they're in the Super Bowl. So obviously, first and foremost, the health of Joe Burrow hinges on everything with this team, even though they had a great year with Jake Brown. Well, very competitive, I'll say, with Jake Browning. I think with them, though, the T. Higgins debacle, they've gotten past that. Well, I don't want to say debacle, but the T. Higgins push and pull, they've gotten him to sign the franchise tag. We know that they're not going to re-sign him because Joe Burrow's contract kicks in. Then, they also have to sign Jamar Chase. So T. Higgins, after already letting go of Tyler Boyd, we know that Jamar Chase is next up to get paid in this wonky, out of the world contracts that are going for wide receivers. So Jamar Chase is going to get paid. T. Higgins is going to walk at the end of the season. So this, as of right now, is the last run of these three guys being together. And oh, by the way, they also moved on from Joe Mixon as well. Did bring in Zach Moss. I think he's solid. Chase Brown did have some good runs and flashed a lot last year. So he'll be there to work with Zach Moss. The offensive line, they doubled down again with the offensive line, bringing in Orlando Brown. So now that is looking good. They did draft Amarius Mims. I like Amarius Mims, but he does have a little bit of an injury history. So we'll see how all of that goes. The defense, I did like when they did like the drafting of Chris Jenkins. I think he can be a rotational player on that line until they're ready to bring a start, because they did lose big DJ Reader, who was a big part of this defense. To make no doubt about it. But I think they're going to need to see something now from anywhere between Miles Murphy and Joseph Asad. One or both those guys need to step up, because in a year they're going to have to make some decisions between Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, who are their two anchors on that defensive line. So they did bring in Geno Stone. Dax Hill's got another year up under his belt. Mike Hilton in the slot is a solid, but their cornerbacks themselves are going to be something to be desired. I've seen them in preseason move Dax Hill around a lot, because Von Bell is still there at safety. And like I said, they signed Geno Stone, but they've moved Dax Hill around a lot. I think they've been playing him at cornerback simply because they don't have a lot there. This is just the last run for them. And then we're going to find out who Joe Burrow really is. He's ascending, but he needs to stay healthy and stay on track. And say that he's going to stay healthy. And I have this team at 12-5, and possibly, I haven't said it yet, we'll talk about it later, possibly going on a Super Bowl run with the last iteration of this team as is.
Yeah, you talked about some of the key additions. We talked about one of the key losses for Baltimore with safety Geno Stone. He goes to Cincinnati. I think that's a big addition. He had a great season last year. I think he helps out the secondary. I think Von Bell is a nice addition. Running back Zach Moss, I think, is a nice replacement for Joe Mixon. Probably not as good of a player as Joe Mixon, but I think he gives you about 80%, 85% of what Joe Mixon can do. Defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, I think, was a nice pickup. And, of course, tight end Mike Gesicki, I think, was a really nice addition to this offense as well. I think when you look at Burrow, of course, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins back, like you mentioned there with the franchise tag, along with rookie Jermaine Burton, this is an interesting wide receiver room this year. Look, Jermaine Burton hasn't got on the field a whole lot this preseason, but he's looked great when he's gotten in the game. I think this is the best group of weapons that Joe Burrow has maybe ever had in Cincinnati. Now, too many young and inexperienced defensive backs, to your point, Alex. I think there's some question marks there. The offensive line continues to be a question mark, even though they've addressed it. And look, if they don't find an answer for this O-line problem that they've had, because they've really struggled to build a good O-line in front of Joe Burrow, we're going to run into another Andrew Luck situation here with Joe Burrow if this continues, because like we mentioned with the availability, that's the big question mark for this guy. When he's on the field, he's great, but it's just hard to predict when this guy has been hurt so many times in his career already. Now, the season over-under win total in Vegas is 10.5. Look, I'm going to take the under with 10 wins. I think they're a very good team, but I still think there's some holes on this team. I don't think they're as good as Baltimore, and I think they end up in second place in the North and are in the playoff mix. And when they get in the playoffs, and if Joe Burrow's healthy, anything can happen, to your point, Alex, but that's where I've got them finishing. If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP, and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.